I'm investigative journalist Molly Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hey y'all, I'm Molly Barrows. Welcome to the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast, where, as you know, we dive into some pretty scandalous crimes and cases that bubble up right here in Northwest Florida. And there's no shortage of those scandalous cases in Northwest Florida, as well as ones that pop up around the country. And that's one of those that we're talking about today. And there's so many of these cases, no matter where they happen, that it causes the same kind of trauma and the same kind of issues that I think that affect families that it's important to talk about. And joining me as always is Pam Hill. For those who follow the podcast on a regular basis, you know that Pam herself is a pharmacist and an advocate for victims because she has experienced violent crime in her own family. If you're not familiar, you need to check out some of our other episodes. Mommy Killers 1 and 2 are good examples of just what Pam has experienced. And she comes at a lot of these cases with so much unique experience. And sadly, this is one of those that just made me sick. There's video of it. This dad is what we're talking about that ran his kid to death basically on a treadmill. And there's video of this little boy just violently just dropping, getting thrown off of it over and over and over again, and the dad making him get back up. And then eventually it came to time when he just couldn't get back up.
It's amazing. This breaks my heart. It breaks your heart. It's a case that we've been looking at for a while, and we're able to get this together because we finally have a verdict. So the little boy's name, he's 6 years old. His name is Corey Micciollo, and his mom's name is Brianna Micciollo. And the father that came into the picture later, his name is Gregor. So, but they never were his parents together. They never were a couple. Brianna and Chris had a non-consensual sexual, I don't want to say relationship, but event. And that is how Corey was conceived. So Brianna was raising Corey by herself. She had some problems with drugs. She was 16 years old when he got her pregnant, 17 years old when Corey was born. She was unemployed. She didn't have a lot of family support. She had some.
A kid herself.
Right, exactly.
And then here struggling with addiction issues as well. That's tough.
Right. And think about it. In the 11th grade. In the 11th grade, I'm just trying to figure out what time our softball game is that night.
Right.
You know, it's just a different world. So she's doing all that, and life is hard. And you'll hear in this story, methamphetamine was her drug of choice.
Bless her heart.
Yeah. So, now they don't call it addiction or addict or stuff. They call it substance use disorder. We're talking a little softer about the disease of addiction. So we're not going, name calling gets people nowhere. Because if you start wearing that sign of shame that goes, I'm a drug addict, and you have to keep saying it over and over and over, how do you recover? And what is the path to get rid of that shame and guilt? With that being said and done, she's like, I got to figure something out. So I think her mom advised her to get a paternity or to sign up for Medicaid and food stamps and stuff like that. But she had to have a paternity test first. This is where Gregor comes in. They find out he's the father, and so here comes something known as child support. You know, these kind of things, divorces can be messy.
Right. Well, they weren't married in this case.
No, they weren't. But I mean, like that kind of father-mother type thing. Custody is what I guess I meant to say. I'm sorry.
Right. No. I think and just for a little backstory on that, he didn't necessarily want this child or to be a part of this child's life, but his family did. And I think that's what you're referring to, that they encouraged him to go ahead and pursue this and provide child support because that would also mean that he would have time to spend with his son.
Right. And it seems like a divorce to me because it's this family and this family and this child. These folks over here didn't have a lot of resources. baby boy, he doesn't have a lot of choices. And over here, Chris's family live in $1 million home. His dad was in law enforcement, and he worked for Homeland Security. And he's a very sophisticated man and has a lot of integrity, because watching him testify some of the things he had to say about his own son, he had to just man up and tell the truth. And he did. So we got this messiness here of custody is the right word, not divorce, but of custody. So you've got Bree who's struggling, and now this man is in her life. So if he doesn't want custody to take care of the child. It's that old thing of, I want him or her, so you can't have them.
I know, punishing her for almost just existing or for having the boy in the first place.
You will see that throughout this whole thing. His need and desire and his evilness and his pathological thinking to punish her far outweighs anybody's best interest, especially the little boys.
Yes, and it's so interesting because, like you said, he was just convicted in this case. He was actually found guilty of aggravated manslaughter of the death of his 6-year-old son, and that was after jurors saw this surveillance video of this guy at a New Jersey gym, basically making him run on this treadmill over and over again. There's nobody else but the two of them in there. Was it at a gym, or where was it?
It was at his apartment. After he lived with his parents in the $1 million home and everything, he decided, well, let me go get my own apartment. I don't think it was so much, let me get my own apartment with Corey. It was more, I want to do what I want to do.
But this was a gym in the apartment building, because it looked like there was a lot of equipment in there, but they were the only ones in there. And that makes sense that it would be empty.
Right. Well, here's the other part, though, how he got there. I was like, how did he get there? So Bree had asked for permission. She's constantly having to scrape and bow to this man. I mean, constantly.
She's in the vulnerable position, especially if she has a history of drug abuse. And they are going to be reluctant. And, from the court's perspective, it would make sense to be reluctant. But at the same time, it also gives power to an apathetic system and somebody who's cruel, as this man seems to be. Because that's what I started to say earlier. Even though he was convicted of aggravated manslaughter, the original charge was murder. So the jurors downgraded. They didn't find him guilty of murder. And I imagine that's got to be heartbreaking for the mom.
Yeah, they were okay with that because they just didn't want him to get away with it. He also got guilty on child endangerment also.
Good.
So there's 2 charges there. And he's kind of a pouty little man. He's handsome. There's no doubt about that. He's a pouty little man. He sits
a handsome,
there.
pouty man.
Well, he is. And that's why I look at him like, quit pouting. Man up and quit being so evil to everybody. But see, these are people that get to do what they want all the time. He has a degree in psychology. He's not a dummy.
Right.
He's going back to school. He's pursuing his master's degree. But instead of just concentrating on that, he didn't come into the little boy's life, Corey's life, until he was almost 5 years old.
Gosh, and it didn't take him long to destroy him,
No,
apparently.
He died of a busted, bruised, broken heart administered on him by his dad, quote unquote.
I know. And if you haven't seen the video, you really got to take a look at it. It's in that black and white footage. But again, they're the only ones in there, which struck me. And you have him almost like a drill sergeant standing over this little boy. And he's got his little jogging pants on and his shirt on. And he is literally just running as hard as he can. He's perfectly healthy looking. I mean, he doesn't look overweight. He doesn't look, I don't know. We can talk about that in a second, what Chris's motivations were or what he claimed. I think it had something to do with like slimming him down, if you will. But he looked perfectly healthy. He was working so hard to please his father, and he just keeps falling, and it's like wham, and he hits the back of it and goes off, or wham, and he hits the floor. And every single time you can't hear it, but you can just see the body language, and he's like, get back up, get back up. And it hurts my heart. I'm a mother. I know a lot of people who even aren't parents, they have a heart for children. Nobody wants to see that sort of cruelty done to anyone that's vulnerable, but not a 6-year-old boy, certainly not your own son. If you didn't want him, give him back to your mom, or have some sort of oversight and accountability if you're truly concerned about his safety. But that was just anger at her. To me, it came across like he definitely wanted to punish her by hurting their son.
Well, haven't we seen this like a million times?
Yes.
It's the tiredest story I've ever heard. Parental alienation, where, I mean, can you believe they have to tell grown people, quit talking bad about him, you quit talking bad about her. So they had to do a lot of that here. Unblock each other. You're going to have to cooperate. The person he's with has to, it's just normal stuff. Like, it seems like a divorce, normal custody stuff. But the way he got in the gym was Bree had taken him. She said, may I take him? I mean, I just hate that she has to be like this with him. But may I take him to see Grandpa? And so they went up there, and they were on their way back. He gave her a time. Yes, you can, but you follow my rules and my times.
Very
So she's
controlling.
like, yeah, fine. I just want to see my kid, because she lost custody and she had supervised visits and they had to be at his house, because at her house, her mama's house, other people live there. And he said, I don't want any of them there except your mom. So, I mean, he controls everything.
And
look
likes
how
it
went.
that way,
Oh,
apparently.
yeah. So when she's trying to come back from Pawpaw's house, they come back and the traffic is terrible. So she texts him, basically tells him the traffic's terrible. He's like, well, fine, when you get back, I'll just take it off your time the next time. It's so petty, pouty, foolish, So she gets back. She's glad. He said, we'll work it out. We'll take it off. So still messiness. So he goes, I'm not going back up to my apartment. Bring him to the gym. That's where I am. Okay, at the gym in his apartment. He doesn't realize there are surveillance cameras there.
I wondered about that.
He's so arrogant. He doesn't realize that. And some of the time he's over there pumping his iron and stuff, but he keeps going back to the boy. And I love athletics. I love sports. And I was watching him run. And he had good form for a 6 years old. And I'm like, why am I saying that about 6 years old? They should be dragging their feet, doing this. Have you fallen on a treadmill before?
No, but it looks painful.
Yeah,
I've run on them before.
Yeah, I have. I've fallen on it. If you just get your foot crooked or something, or you get tired or you stumble. I've done it. I've done it at my gym.
There's hardly any way to recover if you don't quickly grab those arms.
Well, and you hit your chest hard. There's no other way to fall but your chest and chin, and it throws you off like a conveyor belt.
No, it just makes me sick, like we were talking earlier. It's hard to even watch that video. I mean, I have a 12-year-old daughter. I remember when she was 6, and they love you so much. They just want to please you so much. And that's, I think, what hurts my heart almost as much as the physical damage that's done to children during child abuse cases. It's the emotional rejection. It's the emotional message of, you don't matter. You're insignificant. You're bad. He's basically telling that kid, you deserve to be punished. And then I watched a video that the mom did with Inside Edition. And she talked about how she kept warning the court. She kept warning people. Her own son was telling her, I don't feel safe. Why won't anybody help me? And it broke my heart when she says, I think he just gave up.
Well, she got in contact with what they call DCPP, Department of Children and Protection and Permanency. I don't understand that last part. I probably could have looked into it a little more, but this is so chaotic. I'm like, whatever. She contacted them over 100 times, wrote about it, even asked for emergency, that 2 days before he died, asked for an emergency custody hearing. So it's all just convoluted. 6 times falling on the treadmill, and he's over there working out one time, but then he comes back. He stands over him, like you said, like a drill sergeant, kind of leaning over, like a rude person would. And so he falls, puts him back. Falls 6 times, gets up 6 times. A couple of those times, he put his mouth on top of this little boy's head and bit his head. You can see that on the video.
That little boy.
And he was scared, and he wanted to not just punish the little boy, I guess, for being born.
That's the way it comes across to
adorable.
me. It's about her punishing her, the mom.
She said that her little boy, Corey, was sweet and loving and silly and happy, coloring and playing games and his little army guys and stuff. That's what a 6-year-old should be doing, not running on a treadmill. We have a metaphor for life, running on a treadmill, running on a treadmill. This little boy should just be playing and breathing and giggling and laughing. But this isn't his little life right now. It's at 6 years old.
It's gone now.
It is.
6 years old.
But the thing, let's go back to the word. He wants to punish the mother. Punish her. I mean, he was there too.
Well, and then the thing that goes back to my mind too, and again, he's the only one responsible for what he did to his son. But if his family was encouraging him to be a part of his children's life, which is understandable, any normal grandparent that is loving and caring wants to be a part of a grandchild's life. And however that birth came about, I mean, certainly there are challenges when it wasn't planned, when there's no real relationship between the parents, but I can understand them wanting that. But at any point, because what we're going to talk about here too in a minute is just the number of bruises that he already had. That's why the mom was seeking that order to protect him, all of these things. So I'm wondering, did his parents ever know of this? Didn't they ever sense this attitude that he had towards this whole situation? This can't have just been in the video at the gym. He can't have just showed her these signs of frustration, controlling, abusive behavior. I just wonder if any friends and family saw this and they're like, well, this is just the price we got to pay to be a part of this little boy's life because it cost that little boy his life to have this monster in his life.
I don't think the grandparents on either side saw that. I think that Bree's mother could see that she was trying her best. And it's such a struggle. The disease of addiction, I say disease every time because it is. We don't go finding everything wrong with everybody that's got, like diabetes or a broken leg. I almost wish with that, if it wouldn't be labeled, that you could say, look, I'm struggling with this right now.
That's a really good point because, as you know, and if you're a new listener, then you'll hear now for the first time, but I was a television reporter for many, many, many years and here locally in the Pensacola area. And I remember there was a story one day, we have what's called the Pensacola Bay Bridge or 3 Mile Bridge. And it's a 2-lane, years ago, it was just 2-lane going both directions. But during rush hour, on one side you have the city of Pensacola and on the other side you have the city of Gulf Breeze. And somebody was coming from Pensacola into Gulf Breeze, and Gulf Breeze is a bedroom community of Pensacola. So you have like full lanes of traffic going the opposite direction, and a car coming off the bridge because it's two separate bridges, but coming off the bridge, the roads are together. It's not separate anymore. So there's no barrier. It's just traffic going two ways. And this person comes off the bridge and just flies right into head-on morning rush hour traffic, kills at least one person, injures many others. It's just this horrific experience. And we don't, in the media, you go with what you've got. And so we were able to report some basic minimal information, but we didn't know anything about the driver. We just went by what witnesses described, and that he had been driving erratically on the bridge, that he'd been kind of behaving in a weird way. People were already starting to report him. And then he went skyrocketing off the end of the bridge and caused this terrible fatal accident. And so we're basically saying on air, we don't know what's going on with the driver, but people said it certainly appeared like he was not in control of his car. So we don't know why that's the case. And his daughter just showed up crying at the station because she was like, he's a diabetic and there were problems with his medication and he wasn't able to take it like when he needed to. And it was beyond his control. He didn't know what was going on. He basically went unconscious. There at the end, he was trying to hang on. It's why the people saw him driving erratically, but then he went unconscious at the end and went unconscious with his foot on the gas and shot into the oncoming lane.
Oh my gosh.
And so we do understand that. We can wrap our minds around a medical reason for something horrible happening.
Right.
But it is hard, whether it's addiction or even mental illness, I think, for people to say, hey, what is the reason that they did this?
Right.
You can't point to it as easily as, well, it was a lack of insulin or it was too much insulin.
Right. Some things are measurable and some things aren't. And this is another place where, we all just got to do better. And any way that somebody can teach us, I'm willing to learn and see things, because some things are accidents. Some things are thought about. I believe in second chances, third chances, all that. And then I have to sit here thinking about my nephew that killed my sister. I believe in forgiveness for him, but I don't want him back out to kill again,
Right, because in those sorts of cases, it's subjective. Like, how can you measure when somebody's going to be mentally ill again?
Right. Well, because he did that under the best of conditions with someone that loved him more than anybody. He killed the person that loved him the very most and would do anything, put him to get help in a situation like that. His dad took him out. So it's that kind of thing. I do not believe in saying mental illness is the same as forensics. It's like when you do something criminal, and sometimes that is a result of some mental illness, but we can't just give that as a pass.
Right. Even with this particular case with this boy's father, I mean, there's got to be some sort of mental illness that would make you just resort to that level of cruelty.
Yeah, I think he's a narcissist, which I say about a lot of people it's just selfishness.
Yes.
I mean, there is just one thing. I go to counseling all the time, and one of my counselors told me, she said, basically, and I forgot what percentage it was, but it was high. She said, most conflicts and most things boil down to selfishness. And I don't like that. I don't want that word associated with me too much. Everybody's selfish every now and then. But I remember when my mom would tell me when I was doing something selfish, when I was little, she didn't say my name, she said, selfish. Like that. And I was like, what? I did not want that label. And it was so effective. She wasn't ugly. It's what I was doing. But when your mom say selfish,
well, it gives it a name.
Yeah.
And it's rejecting the behavior without rejecting the person.
Yeah, this was not a cool move. Sylvia hadn't had it, though. My mom was a woman of few words, but they were powerful.
That's right. If you're listening and not watching, Pam's got her finger up, like selfish, pointing
at you.
Yes.
With a finger up. You don't point at people. That's rude. But she made sure it was me. But I think about that a lot.
But it's the heart of the matter.
Yeah,
and I think with so many of these crimes that we cover, that's exactly what it boils down to. Whatever the mental illness, the category of dysfunctional personality that you may want to give something, the bottom line is it's varying degrees of ultimate selfishness.
Yeah, and just being, everything's about me, the meites. But even Corey came home the very first time he was with his dad with a busted lip.
Oh, no.
So how are these things happening? And the mother sees them and she reports them. And this is the part that I want us to work on too. When you do a report to someone that about your child, about your life, about we've been dealing with it with Ben Brown with the Department of Health. Answer us back. Even if the answer is, I got your letter and I don't care.
Right.
You know?
Right. Oh, don't have any interest in what you have to say. Don't even care about your response, but at least give one.
Right. And then you can govern yourself accordingly and go, since my letter doesn't move you, I've written plenty of letters to a judge on my family's case about my little niece. Plenty of them. I mean, 47-page letter, many. I've kept every one of them. He chose not to answer me at all, but I still have them, and we will talk about it later.
Right. I know. And let's talk a little bit about that. Just the lengths that she went to try to get something done about this before her son died, because she believes if people had stepped up like they were supposed to, that her son would still be alive.
Right. And
there were two different judges.
Right. One judge looked at it and he looked at it. And
but let's talk about how the judge even got it before him.
Okay. Well, they sent it in to this judge. And
was that the CP order that when she went to Child Protective Services and had video?
Yeah, the first judge. He looked at that and didn't do anything. Then later...
said didn't... how do you look at that and not do anything?
Let's
talk about that for a second.
I don't know. It makes me wonder what people see with their eyes, because... I don't have any children, but I love children. I love helping you. I love helping my sisters. I just love my neighbors. I love children. They're so sweet. And you think, this is what life's about. I can help them. We can do things for them. I don't know how you can sit there and watch that and watch a grown man put his teeth on top of a little boy's head while he's making him run. And it wasn't running like at 2.5.
No, he was giving it his all.
It was up in the fives.
It was going.
I don't even run that fast. I can't, but I don't.
Not unless
used to when I was
chased,
younger.
right.
Yeah, right. But it's just too much. But another judge, he looked at it and he said, this guy's a monster. And so he had him arrested.
That's good. Well, it just goes to show you the difference in perspective and how subjective it can be. And that's part of what concerns me about so many of these crimes that end up in the system. Is it the apathy of the system? Is it just depending on the luck of the draw? What prosecutor you get, what judge you get, how much they care, what mood they're in? Did they have a big breakfast? Did they get a good night's sleep? Did they have a good relationship with their significant other? Any of these things can come into play. And I think this is a good example. Two different judges saw the same tape, and one was completely apathetic in the response, the one that actually could have stopped it before it happened. And then the second one was like, what kind of a monster would do something like this? So, it just goes to show that there is so much subjectivity in the criminal justice system. You just have to, it's like Russian roulette. Will I get justice in this situation?
Right. And I think a forensic pathologist, it's hard to say, forensic pathologist looked at that, and this was in 2021. In September. And he was shocked. He couldn't believe it. And finally, he went to a judge. Finally, an honorable judge said, no, we're going to take care of this monster right here. Yeah,
because and we hadn't even talked about how he ended up at the hospital, but basically they tried to argue that the boy died of sepsis. That's what they were saying during trial. Right. But when you see the bruises and the medical examiner was like, nah, that's not at all what happened. It was trauma to the chest and abdomen. And again, this is in New Jersey, but he brought him he wasn't even arrested till a year after this little boy died, but he brought his limp body to the hospital, to an emergency room in New Jersey, and he died about an hour later after coding twice, and they tried so hard to bring him back, but they were unable to do it. So you do wonder, how long had he been limp? How long had he been unconscious before his father actually took him in for help?
Well, the mom, she took him, the treadmill incident happened on March 20th. And she, in the time being back and forth, her child's coming back lethargic, timid, fearful, shaky.
Not the little boy she raised.
And she had taken him to the doctor, the pediatrician, and the pediatrician had said, what's going on? Talk to me. And he just, secret keeping. And children shouldn't have to do that either. Secret keeping. And he's finally talks to the pediatrician, because they're good about working with kids. That's what they do. And he's like, don't tell. And he started crying. So she was talking to him like, I can help you, have to tell me. But basically he told the pediatrician, this is where this came in. He said, my dad's trying to help me football, teach me how to throw football. And he says, I'm too fat. Just like other cases we've talked about, too fat, on a child.
It's unbelievable.
Yes.
It's just an excuse. It's just a sign of his sickness, not the little boy's.
But the little boy's having to go repeat that again to the doctor.
The shame that comes with that.
And barely so. So he comes back and forth. And so on April the 1st is when Bree sees, this is like 10 days after the treadmill incident. She sees her son is kind of lethargic and kind of slurry and won't wake up easily. And it's just not his normal.
Like head trauma.
Right, happy little boy self. So she takes him to the doctor because the pediatrician that was telling her, he's told me that he's been running on a treadmill because he's too fat. And so she recommended he go to a specialty hospital there, where a doctor that specialized in childhood, like child trauma, things like that. So she went there, and then once again with this checking in with this man, she's like, I'm taking him to the hospital. And he calls and goes, where are you at? And she said, I'm at the hospital. And then her phone dies, so she can't call him back. And then when she gets her phone charged, she tries to call him, he won't answer. So that was on April 1st. So she can't get him, takes the little boy home to her house. They go at night, go sleep, then get up the next morning on the 2nd of April, go back to him, and he's mad at her, still mad again. Mm-hmm. Well, then the little boy starts doing all this during the day with him, and he calls her up and says, I need his insurance card. I'm taking him to the hospital. So I figure right then, 10 days later.
And what else did he do while he was there?
Yeah, who knows? And then 10 days later, and then they say when he went into the hospital, he was carrying the little boy with his face nuzzled into him. And they wouldn't, he would not turn him where people could see him.
Because of the bruises, probably.
Mm-hmm. And because of what was happening, I think he was just so limp. And finally, a triage nurse saw his face, and she said his eyes had rolled back into the back of his head.
God love.
So they took him in, and they started to do treatment on him, doing CAT scans and other things. But he had a seizure while he was in the CAT scan, and he was slurring, and he had a seizure, and then he had cardiac arrest.
He was dying.
He did die right there. But in the time being, his dad decides, let me peace out of here. This is too much for me, and he leaves.
Oh, is he going to go work out?
I don't know what he's going to do.
Torment?
Right. I think he ended up in Arkansas because he ran away.
Because he knew he'd done something wrong.
Right.
So he could be a real tough man with a 6-year-old boy, but he can't face the consequences.
And he kept his mother from seeing or being with him. Nobody was with him, but thank God for the nurses and the doctors, because nobody he knew was with him. And I don't know how much he knew about what was going on, but this selfish man, this selfish, pouty man, controlled everything. And here we are.
And you just wonder if that was really the outcome that he wanted all along, or if it was just, it makes me feel good to do this to him, and wasn't even concerned about the consequences. Didn't even think that far ahead of what could happen.
I think he was doing it more to do to her, because every one of us have a button that someone can push. There's one button that people can push, and it's different on a lot of people. But for me, it's my family. If you push that button of being mean or cruel to my family, then you kind of got me.
Yeah. No, I guess what I'm saying is I wonder if he intended to kill him.
I don't think so.
Yes.
I don't think he meant to kill him. Here we go again with this. But people, they're just not good thinkers.
Right.
I mean, really?
Yeah, you can't treat a child like that, any human body, especially one as vulnerable as a 6-year-old, and expect him to withstand that sort of abuse. Well, it'll be interesting to see what he gets sentenced, because his sentencing, I believe, is coming up August 2nd.
It is.
And he faces like 10 to 30 years in prison. Had he been convicted of murder, he could have faced life in prison.
Right. He was offered a plea deal for 30. Even his own attorney got up there and kind of strutted around and said, hey, you're not going to like him. I don't like him. He's horrific. He's a monster. He's this, that, and the other. But he didn't kill this boy. He just had to get that out of the way. He's a big old jerk. So that's what he had to do. I think they were just trying to minimize the damage.
Yes.
Because with him rolling the dice, he can be sentenced from 10 to 30 years for that. And I guess if you look at it like that, I guess that's a win for him.
Yeah, and he's going to appeal it regardless, is what his attorney said.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's going to do that. It's just so sad. I just feel like to cry right now.
I know. Like we were talking earlier, I was like, my God, talking about this story is almost like watching a bag of kittens drown.
Oh, my goodness.
It's just as horrible.
Awful,
it's the saddest thing in the world, but even, obviously exponentially more horrible, because this is the life of a little boy.
Yeah. Well, we got a lot more to do between now and the sentencing. And there's just so much crazy stuff. We can't even talk about it all today. But we'll just keep working on this one and come back on August 2nd after that.
Absolutely. We'll be following up. And if you have anything you want to weigh in, we'd love to hear from you. You can always weigh in on the comments on our YouTube channel, or feel free to email us as well. I'm Molly at mollybarrows.com. But we're super excited to have the opportunity to talk about some of these cases that weigh on our hearts, that basically put us back on our haunches, if you will, because just when I think I've heard all the horrible things that people can do to each other, they never cease to surprise you.
Nope. Little broken, bruised heart.
Awesome. Well, Pam, thank you so much for joining us on this one today. And we appreciate you for joining us on this episode of Gulf Coast Confidential. I'm your host, writer, and producer, Molly Barrows, with co-host and researcher Pam Hill. And a big thanks, as always, to our director, editor, and production engineer, James Roy. Remember, you can listen to more of our Gulf Coast Confidential conversations wherever you get your favorite podcast. You can also watch on the YouTube channel. Just don't forget to like and subscribe, y'all.
Subscribe.
All right, we'll see you next time.